All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ladies in Red. Phoebe here with Sydney and Kristen. And today we're really excited with this episode. We're going to try to kind of take a personal take on the different topics that we talk about and really talk about what sports mean to us. We see all the time with major athletes of how successful they are on and off the field. And that's a direct correlation of the skills and everything that you learned through growing up with sports and competing in sports, practices, games, all of that. It just really gives you a lot of insight and a lot of great character traits that you could take on outside of sports and things that you can apply to life in general. So we thought it'd be really cool to talk about that and kind of dive into our own lives.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this episode just because I think one of the most valuable things about playing sports is just learning from them. Obviously, it's the experiences, but I think what comes with the experiences is developing relationships with, I know last week we talked about mentors and your teammates and making valuable connections for the rest of your life, but also learning life lessons that can carry you into post-grad, into job, family life, everything. So I'm super excited about to talk about this topic.
Yeah, I think this is interesting as well. And it's a unique perspective because we're not just necessarily talking about professional athletes, but rather talking about what we've experienced thus far in our college athletic careers. And just again, we play different sports. So it's nice to talk about that as well. And like you mentioned, said the things that we learn in sports kind of just carry on with us throughout our entire life.
Exactly. And I feel like everybody everywhere has that thing that kind of defines them or that thing they're a part of. And sports is such a cool thing that it has so many different levels that so many people can relate on because I wish I knew the statistics off the top of my head, but I'm sure a large majority of the population has played a sport at one point in their life, whether it was up to the college level like we are, or if it was that one day in gym class, or if they were in Little League when they were in kindergarten, something like that, that sports are something that are known to bring people together and something that almost everyone can relate to. And then once you start climbing that level, it's that thing, it makes me think of when I'm in a job interview or talking to a networking connection, and sports usually is a very good common factor because there's that respect behind it, that respect that, if someone plays a sport, there is a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, I personally know from experience with, like Phoebe said, interviews and talking to people. I think a lot of the traits that I describe myself have to do with my sport, and I use my sport as a way of comparing how I would do well in a certain position. And I think a lot of what we'll talk about has to do with that. But I think they do teach you life lessons and just how to interact with people as well. It's super important.
And also just growing up playing sports at all different levels, we play on various teams, we meet different people, where your communication skills greatly improve. The recruitment process, you learn how to talk to college coaches and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that definitely influences it as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. The communication is huge. I know I've talked to people with various interviews and such, and they always say the athletes stand out because they kind of carry themselves a little differently. And that's not to say the athletes are the top, whatever. It's just something that they have learned. Like you said, talking to coaches, being recruited, we were taught at such a young age to respect our coaches and to listen to them and have trust in them. So we are kind of wired in our brains that whoever our mentor is or our coach, leader, boss, whoever it is, that we kind of have that faith in them and we know how to interact with them. We know how to address them. I know I've had coaches that have been very, very casual, and then I've had coaches that are very serious. So we kind of, I'm sure you guys have seen this too, have kind of all sorts of types of quote unquote bosses that were acting as coaches when we were growing up.
Yeah. And I think what either Kristen or Phoebe said about recruiting is super important. I think I was always a super shy kid. And I think going through the recruiting process totally changed me because you're just forced to talk to superiors and kind of sell yourself. And I think that's a super important quality going into interviews as well, selling yourself and making yourself seem valuable. And I think that's a good attribute to have. And I think recruiting really changed the way I communicated with people and professionalism and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think the point that you brought up about like selling yourself is like really important. Just because I feel like that's a really difficult thing to learn how to do, and just having like X amount of years starting in high school with the recruitment process, you like go through it various times with various coaches, like across all divisions, maybe whatever. But I think like that definitely helps shape like your ability to be able to sell yourself and like communicate and like be more comfortable talking about yourself, because I feel like some people like, oh, like I don't want to talk about myself, like whatever, it might be awkward for them, but I think that definitely like helps shape and change that behavior.
Yeah, and that's only going to help us in the future. Athletes as a whole, being able to have that communication skills, that's one of the major soft skills that employers are looking for in the future. And just like anybody that when you work with someone, you want them to be able to express what they're thinking and be able to sell themselves if they have a lot to offer. And if you have a lot to offer and you don't say anything about it, then how are they supposed to know? You know, it's that thing. For me, I'm going into the business world, so that's definitely a big factor that I've learned and gained from sports, is having that communication, being able to quote unquote sell myself to these various interviews and jobs, because I've learned throughout recruiting and getting on different teams and stuff that I know how to kind of accentuate my strengths or acknowledge my weaknesses, or I can talk about how I can overcome those weaknesses or something like that. Just different things that like we don't even notice that like we got from sports. And like it probably can be coming from any organization that someone's a part of, not necessarily just sports, but sports is so obvious because every single day when we are playing our sport, we're facing failure and mistakes and flaws, weaknesses, and we're learning through ourselves, through our teammates, through our coaches, how to evolve and how to like cope with that. And that's just like such a good life skill to have for like an everyday thing, because in our lives, we every single day are facing obstacles, you know, to try to get through the journey of life there.
Yeah. One thing that I loved that my high school coach, Tiffany Capilano, shout out, did when we were in high school was she just was the type of coach that she didn't want to hear anything from parents, and I think that's obviously a big college thing, but she was the type of coach that she wanted you as a 14-year-old to go up to her and ask her, what do I need to do to play more? Or what do I need to do to see the field more? Or what do I need to do to improve or be a better teammate? And I think that's one life skill that a lot of people should learn early on. And I applaud her for teaching us that so young, even though it was scary in the moment to be 14 and like have to go up to a superior like that. I think it's so important to know that. And I think that can be like applied to the workplace as well. Like if you aren't succeeding in your job, going up to your boss and saying, what can I do to improve? And I think even if you aren't necessarily doing bad in that position, I think it could help you, and you obviously can always improve. And I think that's super important to bettering yourself and bettering whatever position you're in, whether that be sports or the workplace or whatever.
Yeah, and I also definitely think kind of building off of that, being able to accept criticism is something that I've learned as an athlete. I know like it's carried over into the classroom or like over into when I've had various types of jobs, just like being able to take someone's comments and like changing the way I work or like the way I'm playing my sport, whatever, and just like being able to handle it like emotionally and like kind of like using that to better myself rather than like being like, oh, well, like this person got mad at me for this, like I can't do it. I don't want to do it, stuff like that. So I think that like that's an important aspect that a lot of athletes do take away from sports. I know I did, especially. And I think that's definitely going to help me in the long run.
Oh my gosh, yeah, 100%. That just in general, nobody's perfect. Like we are never going to be executing anything we do perfect, sports or not. And the ability to acknowledge that and be able to take criticism and be able to adapt is like such a good skill. And I found myself that's probably one of the biggest takeaways for me from sports. I'm a senior now in college, wrapping up my sports career for now, but definitely in all the years I have probably played sports upwards of almost, I don't know, like 18 years, probably, like whatever, like however long we've been able to play sports. And I think that that's the biggest thing that I've learned over the years through the various coaching styles that I've had, that there are so many ways to get criticized and get pointed out. And then there's an infinite amount of ways to respond to that. And the way you respond to it, that was my biggest thing, that when I was younger and going through sports, my dad used to always say that, like, it does not matter if you make a mistake, it matters how you respond to that. So like, it's inevitable, you're going to make a mistake, you're going to mess up, but it's how you respond to that. And that's the same for getting critiques and stuff like that. Like, you are most likely going to be critiqued. You are going to be told, hey, you did this wrong, or like, hey, maybe you should do this differently next time, that type of thing. But it's whether you react to that and say, okay, I got it, let me try to figure out how I can do this better, how can I improve, or if you let it get to you. And I choose the first one, to hopefully better yourself with that criticism, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I'm someone, and I think kind of going off of what Phoebe said, my biggest takeaway from sports, I think, would be failure and accepting it, kind of similar to what Phoebe said. I think I'm someone who hates failure, even knowing that it's sometimes a good thing. I hate losing and I hate failure, but I think it's such a good thing to fail sometimes. And I think sometimes, even during a sports season, a loss, though it's one tally, like, or whatever, like, even though it's a loss, it still could be good for the team because it requires you to step back and take a look at the bigger picture and maybe change something or look at a new perspective. And I think that's super important, um, in anything in life, taking a step back and saying, okay, what should I do? Or should I change my perspective on an idea or a project or something like that? And I think failure, like, it sucks, but it's like the only way people better themselves, by changing what they're doing now.
Yeah, and I think that goes well with the idea of teamwork, which is another thing that I've taken away. I'm sure obviously you guys have too, from playing sports. And because you are like an important individual on the team, but you're also only as important as you contribute to the success of the team. So like, it's not all about you. Like, you have to be able to accept those failures, like we said, but like still be able to move on from them so that you're not impacting the team, in that aspect.
Yeah, and I think it's super important with the whole aspect of teamwork and having a team, that most things in life you are going to be working with people. I know when I was like younger, in like middle school, high school, when you get put in those group projects and you were like, oh, like, I hated group projects, you always got with, like, I was always the one that ended up doing all the work. So when I got put in projects, it was like, oh, I have this one kid in my grade or my group that is not going to do work, whatever. But then, like, even that, and then ever more sports, being on a team, having to trust your teammates and not really having a control of who your teammates are, just accepting them, like, relates back to those group projects, being like, okay, like, yes, you may not be happy with the group project. And like, for me, it was like, I am not in control. I have to rely on other people. But once you get past that, and once you kind of accept that, yes, I'm going to rely on these people because these people they all have the same goal. Because most likely when you're working with a team or a group, everyone has the same goal, and it's probably to succeed. So once you get on board with that and everyone's on the same page, then you can accept that. And it's just such a valuable thing to have, because then those group projects didn't seem as bad, because you knew that everybody wanted a good grade. And even though you may have been doing all the work, maybe that was what was best for that thing, obviously. And then with those like group projects, I always learned that, like, obviously working all together would be the most beneficial one. And then as you grew up, I'm sure you guys had similar situations. Like, as you grew up, everyone kind of realized that. And then in high school, everyone would like split the work evenly and it would be fine. But I think that I learned that through sports first, because I did it at such a young age, that you have to rely on your teammates and stuff. And that's why I was always so frustrated in the group projects, because I was like, everybody should be pulling their weight and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think like all of what Phoebe just said reminds me of like accountability. And I think in sports, like, as an athlete, naturally you hold people accountable. Like, on your team, you say, or that's not okay, or you can go harder, you can be better, you could be faster, whatever. And I think that carries into the workplace, maybe not necessarily as just a regular employee, but as a boss. I think as a boss, holding people accountable and saying, I can see you do better. I know you can do better. And I think that's super important, a super important skill to have in a job setting, or even as a parent, like not being hard on your kids, but knowing like, I know you can do better, like just try or whatever. And I think that's an awesome skill that you can learn from teamwork, and also just playing as a team, kind of competing through accountability. Like if your teammates pushing you to do better and you see them doing better than you, like personally for me, I'm going to want to do better if my teammates are doing better. So I think it's just a competitive thing. And I think competition is important as well in life.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we see it a lot in the workplace where like a lot of projects that companies work on, like you're working as a team, like one person relies on another individual, like you said, Phoebe, just as much as like that person relies on someone. It's just like a big chain. And I think that like if you're not able to do that, it's going to be a lot harder in the long run. But yeah, I feel like working on a team is just like evident in the classroom, like on the playing field, in the workforce. Like it's just going to follow you throughout your entire life.
Yeah. And I think like Sid said it with accountability is huge, because it is very, very obvious in a team setting, a group setting, when you want to hold each other accountable and you want to, like you said, do it for your teammates and stuff, but even more so for yourself, that learning that accountability through sports, that I think is why like student athletes tend to be very good at time management, or very good in the classroom as well as on the field. I know I've heard that a few times. I don't know if there's actually a statistic, but I feel personally that I do better in school when I am playing a sport rather than in the off season, because I think we're in the mode of like holding ourselves so accountable and working so hard that like it's hard to turn that off. So I think that's why like in the off season, when I'm not used to doing it every single day, maybe it's every other day, it kind of slacks a little bit. But when I'm in season and my light switch turned on, I am like so on it, so organized, so accountable. Like I think that it's really important, because that's me being accountable with myself, and that's literally going to be with me for the rest of my life, that skill that I have learned at such a young age.
Yeah, I think what Phoebe said about just being accountable for yourself, like I know for me personally during fall season, I am like, it's a grind every day. Like every day it's nonstop doing schoolwork, sports, whatever. And in your downtime, you're doing things to better yourself in those areas of life. And I think that's super important, to be a workhorse and know that the harder you work at something, the better you're going to be at it. And those things do deserve a lot of your time. Obviously, you deserve time to yourself, but those things do deserve a lot of your time. And I think you see the people who are on a grind and are working the hardest. Those are your leaders on a team, and those are your leaders in the workplace. Those are your leaders who are getting promoted in jobs. And I think that's obviously a great takeaway from sports that I've learned.
Yeah, like I've even noticed throughout the past 4 years at Dickinson, like I've definitely taken the more challenging classes in season, just because I am like more focused. And when I sit down to do work, whether it's like late at night after a game, or like trying to cram it in whenever I have open time, I've noticed that I've like been able to focus more. I do it to a higher standard, and my grades are just like better overall, because I feel like in the off season, in the fall, I'm like, oh, like I have time tomorrow, like I'll just do it then. And then before I know it, like everything's piled up, and then it's like the night before and I have like an essay, I have to study for a test and like all this stuff. And I'm like, why did I do this to myself? But I keep doing it. So I definitely noticed like that time management is totally different in season. And that's something I think I need to work on as an individual, like in the off season, because it's definitely gonna be something that I'm gonna need to use in the future. So I think it's just interesting to see the difference between the two.
Yeah, I think about it like all the time, because I don't know what it is. It must just be like when you're in that mode of like just grinding, like you guys said, like you're just like in that mode and it's hard to turn it off. So like you get like kind of in a slump when you're not doing that on the field all the time. So like then you're outside stuff. But like I find myself like, even like when I go to the gym or like waking up to work out, like it's that waking up and everything. But like once you're up, if I were to motivate myself to get up, run at like 6 or 7 a.m., like I would be so like those days would be so productive. Like that was me, like when I was like in quarantine or like lockdown, like that whole like this summer, like if I were to wake up for those, it was just that initial, like once I was there and like my point is that like once that switch was turned on, so once I was up and running on the street, then that switch was on for the rest of the day. And the rest of the day I was so productive. And I am still trying to figure out how to just get that switch on all the time because that would be great. But I guess that's just something we got to work on. But I totally agree that like I don't know what it is, but it's just that mentality. And then once we're in it, like we're grinding. Like if I were to go get up and go to the gym, like I could say it's gym for hours and just keep doing random things because I'm just like in the go. I don't know what it is, but it's something that we have as athletes that we are just like super motivated once we're in the zone.
Yeah, I think one thing that Phoebe said about waking up early, like I honestly think that is one lesson that you learn from sports. And like I see all of these like memes and posts that are like, I woke up at 7 a.m. this morning thinking that I had practice, but I haven't played sports in 5 years. And I think that's like one thing, like it's obviously such a stressor, but you like I've even done that before. Like I haven't had practice or anything that day and I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, I definitely have to go somewhere. And it's like, no, you don't. Like your life is just like a grind. Like you're always waking up early, but it definitely is a good thing. Like you as an athlete, you can kind of push yourself to wake up because you know that when you do wake up, you can get so much done and you can be so productive and just better yourself during the day. And like Phoebe said, it's just I'm way more productive when I get up early anyway. But
yeah, no, I think Phoebe, you can definitely relate to this. I think one example that like stands out in my mind is from sophomore year. Yeah, spring sophomore year. The obviously in season and like we had 6 a.m. practice on Friday morning. So you had to be in the Klein, like ready to go by like 5:30. And then if you needed to see the trainer before, like you had to go even earlier. So like our alarm clocks were set for like 4:45 in the morning. And it was just like so nerve wracking because you're like, if I wake up and I'm late for practice, like I'm screwed. Or like if I sleep through my alarm. So like I would sleep like in my friend's room just to make sure that I was up and made it there in time. But that's when I took the Phoebe to the managerial class. And it was nice because waking up that early and practicing from like 6 to 8 or 6 to 7:30, whatever, and then just going right to the calf after and studying for like 2 hours before the weekly quiz definitely like impacted my grades because I don't think I would have been able to wake up that early. I'm not a morning person, so I don't think I would have been able to wake up like that early on my own and force myself to go to the calf and study when I could be like, oh, like I could just sleep instead and just study the night before. So I think that's just like an example for me personally. It stands out.
Yeah, and I think that's even more so example of the in season versus out of season. So when Kristen was in season taking managerial, I was out of season because I'm fall, she's spring, and we would stay up late studying for this quiz that we would have every single week. And I had all day. I could have studied all day, but I was just like in the mode that like our schedules ended up matching up that I didn't start studying until she was done practice. We would study together. But like she was in the grind. She was like going practice, study, practice, quiz. And I was just like obviously doing my off season and stuff, but like that was my off season mentality. And it matched up with her in season because she was on that grind. So like it's just a funny thing that like I could have spent like and not have stayed up late and could have done that, but I chose to wait until Kristen was on practice and then study with her and stuff like that. So, but it definitely is. It's just it's the grind. The grind doesn't stop.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we're saying kind of goes with dedication. Like just I think setting the tone with your day, starting with your sport or starting with working out. I feel so accomplished when I do that. And I'm like, I have the rest of the day. Like I have to be as productive during the day as I was during this morning. And I think it just shows how dedicated athletes are when they do wake up and they are productive. And yeah, I think it's super important and just forcing yourself through the tiredness. Like obviously you're tired right when you wake up, but after that you feel so productive.
And I think just like one last thing to build off of that, I think like just as athletes without the dedication characteristic, we wouldn't have been able to play at the elite levels that we have. Like we might not be playing in college right now. It just shows how committed we are to like ourselves, our teammates and coaches, and then just like never settling and always just pushing ourselves as well as our other teammates even harder so that we can achieve like the bigger goals as an individual and team. So.
Why cut your portions down when you are hungry? You want something that is filling and delicious, right? Well, Spoon's Cafe believes in cutting the chemicals, not the portions. Located at 57 West Pomfret Street in downtown Carlisle, Spoon's offers great sandwiches, salads, and soups that are tasty and good for you and will fill you right up. Stop cutting down the size of your lunch and instead get a delicious filling lunch today at Spoon's. Open 6 days a week, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Saturdays at 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Spoon's is the perfect spot to enjoy a great tasting lunch today. So there are a lot of things that every athlete can relate to. And one of those things is stepping outside of your comfort zone. I feel like our teammates, coaches, ourselves always are pushing us to be our best. And sometimes that takes like stepping out of our comfort zone. A lot of times, or I know we talked about it in our last episode, all of us, about how we had to try different positions and stuff. I know for me, when I got to college, my coach was like, oh, like, I think you'd be really good at midfield. I had been playing field hockey since the 3rd grade and have never played anything with defense. So I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not sure. And then I obviously trusted her and had faith in her. And I was just like, all right, if that's what you need, that's what I'm going to do. And that ended up being my position. I ended up playing midfield and even a little bit more of like a forward midfield kind of position for some of the time. And it just took that stepping outside the box and just pushing my comfort zone, learning something new to achieve what I had wanted.
Yeah, I know for me, like exactly what Phoebe said, when I came to college, I had always played forward, and then my coach just kind of didn't really have a conversation with me, just kind of put me at midfield and was like, go do it, like kind of go figure it out. And obviously I was so out of my comfort zone during that, but I think that kind of gave me like the adapt and figure it out mentality and just be adaptable to change and kind of just like I said, figure it out. And I think it grew me as a player. And I think I like learned a lot more about the game just by kind of being thrown in and just in a completely different position at the time.
Yeah, and I remember learning that like during the recruiting process, like one of my coaches used to say, like, you know, you need to be ready to go to college and end up playing someplace else. So she put us at like sometimes different positions. So I just remember like being an outfielder, and then one showcase, like our third baseman was hurt, and she was like, okay, like, Kristen, you're gonna play third. And like it was scary because I hadn't played third since I was like really little, and people were like ripping the ball and stuff. But I did like okay, and I think it just like, I don't know, it bettered me as a player because I was like, okay, like, yeah, sure, like I'll do it, I'll do this for the team, because you can't be selfish at all when you get to college. It's not really about you as an individual all the time. It turns more into like what the team needs in order to succeed.
Yeah, 100%. It's that being adaptable right there again, that being able to just step into that position, even if you're not comfortable or haven't done it before, and being able to work on it and kind of know, like, I know for myself going into a new position, I was always kind of nervous, like, oh, like, I don't really know how to play this position, or I'm afraid I'm going to mess up or anything. But it goes back to like, it doesn't really matter. If your coach sees you there, then you got to go for it and put your best effort forth, because that's all they ask of you, is to try your best. And I think that's just super valuable, because you literally never know like what you're going to end up doing, that in a job you might be asked to do a task that you might think that you aren't capable of. And it's important to not doubt yourself and to just go for it.
Yeah, I think what Kristen said about kind of just doing what you need to do for the team to succeed, I think I think that kind of goes along with just being selfless as a player. And that's another lesson obviously learned from sports, is selflessness, and not thinking this is all about me, this is all about my individual stats. Like, you know, I think all of our sports have to do with being selfless and putting the team before yourself and putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation so that the team succeeds. And I think, like Phoebe said, that's a super important attribute for the real world, because I think you never know what's going to happen. You never know if you get put into a different position in a job or get like presented a project that you've never done something like that before. I think you just need to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, definitely. And just like being able to try something new and be willing to try something new, I think is something that we learn from playing sports at all different levels. And just being like versatile and flexible and stuff like that. Just because like you never know, you might try something new that has always not seemed fun to you, and then you might end up loving it in the end. But yeah.
Yeah. And what Sid said, like being comfortable with being uncomfortable is like huge and such another good takeaway from sports, because we all know that we have been very uncomfortable running those sprints, running those run tests, doing those lifts. It's not always fun and happy go lucky. Obviously, we all love our sports and we love playing it, but there is a lot of other things that go into it. And just having that experience and like not only does that like bond your team, like obviously like down the road you can all relate. Like I know my high school team, like we ran a lot. We ran every single day. We ran after games. We like for an hour after games, and the run depended on how much we played or how well we played. So we always talk about now, like, oh my gosh, remember that time we ran like an absurd amount. Like we were like, wow, remember when we did that? And like it was not fun during the time, but it did make us better, and it proved. We ended up winning 2 state titles. Shout out Ocean City Field Hockey, 5-0 my senior year in the state championship. But that was like because of the running, you know, like not just because that there was other things, but like we went through that, and like yes, it bonded us, and like that was literally the definition of being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like we did not enjoy the running, but we knew it was going to make us better, and we knew that it was going to keep us fit, and that was what was going to push us above the top, because we were so in shape compared to the other teams, and that's one of the things that pushed us ahead. And just that mentality of being comfortable, being uncomfortable is something that not many people learn at that age, but athletes do, because we put our bodies and minds through those things in order to get better.
Yeah, I think one of the best things about sports is I know that all of my college teammates I'm going to be like best friends with forever. And I think I so relate to that, like thinking about things that happened like freshman year at a practice, or like we ran something and like you truly do bond over it. Like you sit back now and you're like, oh my gosh, that sucks so bad, but like you laugh about it and it's so fun. And I think that's just a like thing to look at. Like I was talking about earlier, like bigger picture, like changing your perspective, like in the moment, like, yeah, this run sucks, but I know it's going to make us better. And then in a few hours, we're going to be laughing about how we did it or how much it sucked. And I think that creates a good team dynamic too, because during the run, you're obviously taking it seriously, but I think afterwards you recognize how important it was and how much it brought your team together and bonded everyone as a whole.
Yeah, I think like those high pressure, stressful and challenging situations definitely bring a team closer. I know that like I can think of like a few examples that we've gone through like a practice that were like awful in the moment, but after the fact, like we would just laugh about it. And yeah, and I think like the small things that have happened during a practice where we like laugh about it then, like we still talk about those now, whether it be like freshman year or like last week, whatever. It just like carries on throughout. And I think, yeah, it definitely creates a better team dynamic and bond, like you said, Sid.
Yeah, the team dynamic is something so cool and so special that like all of us have been a part of a team practically our whole lives. Like it's hard to imagine what it's going to be like to not have your sports team to lean on. I'm sure you guys can relate. And obviously we always have our college teams, high school teams. Like we're always going to have those girls, but we're not going to be going to practice every single day anymore. Like sad to say it, like in the near future. So it's kind of crazy that we're entering this part of our lives that we're not going to have that support system literally with us 24/7, because we all know that we spend so much time with our team. And that, like Chris is saying, like those little things at practice, or Sid with those runs, like the little memories that you make every day, that I feel like we're going to find that in different areas. We're going to be able to like kind of, I don't know if it's going to be like at our workplace or whether it's with our family, but it's kind of crazy to think about how much our teams have impacted our lives throughout the years.
Yeah, I think meeting new people obviously meeting the right people, but meeting new people can make you a better version of yourself. And I think teach you new things and just teach you kindness and respect for other people and just how to be a good friend. And I think college sports too, like it's not easy. It's hard. It's always going to be hard. It's always going to be difficult. There's going to be days where you're going to think, I just can't do this anymore. Like school and field hockey or school and any sport is too much. And you just feel like you can't do it, but you'll always have your teammates to rely on and teach you how to push through. And like Phoebe said, I hope that after college, I find something like that because I'm going to need it in anything that I do. But yeah, that's like one of my favorite takeaways from sports as well.
And I think that's really similar to what Leah mentioned last week when she was talking about how she had her teammates by her side, like to capture the first Olympic gold medal. And just like now she can share that memory with them. And I'm sure like they talk about all the struggles they went through on that journey and like all the fun things that they've had. And now it's something that they'll have for life. And I think that just like having a good team and like having those people who you can fall on whenever you need help with, whether it's on field, off the field, like socially, stuff like that, there'll always be people that will be there for you. And I think that like your teammates are definitely going to help you with your stressful situations, which obviously is going to happen after graduation, where you're going to be tossed something challenging at a job and be expected to figure it out. And then you'll have like your coworkers to lean on and help you, guide you along the way. So that's definitely a very similar thing to college athletics.
Yeah, 100%. And just, it's crazy how sports bond, even among like, not even like obviously among your teammates, but then among other sports, like you and I, Kristen, like, and Sydney, but like we're on different sports teams, but we all have that bond because we all know that we like work so hard and we all have similar experiences. Like think about how many times you've like told a sports story, like when you met someone new, or like I know I've used it in interviews all the time when looking for jobs and stuff. Like it's just such a common thing. And I just think that's so cool that we're lucky enough to have gotten to this level and been able to play at this level, that it has become this bond amongst collegiate athletes and athletes in general. Like it's just so cool to me that we are a bit part of this big community.
Yeah, I love the whole bond concept. And I think that rings true because I love talking to my friends on other sports teams and hearing about how like their practices are going, or about horrible moments from practices or really awful runs, because I think it kind of like makes it more relatable, and I can be like, oh, so it's like not just me going through like these difficult times. And I think it's just awesome that it builds that sort of community across even all of Dickinson, especially because Dickinson is so small. I mean, you could probably name one person on every single sports team, probably more than one person, which is a really awesome community to have. And I think that's something that I'll really miss from Dickinson, is knowing other sports, like other athletes, and connecting with them on a personal level.
Yeah, and it's true, like even with like the hair society, like the sister devs, like stuff like that, like we're all here for each other. No matter what the sport is. Like I just feel like there's such a good community here where like we could easily go to like a football game and cheer them on, or like a baseball game, field hockey game, stuff like that. And like I feel like people from all different sports would come and watch like their friends and support them as well. But yeah, just like going back to what you were talking about, Phoebe, like in the interview process, I know I've been asked questions like, oh, like what has been one of your biggest challenges, or like what do you consider to be one of your greatest accomplishments? And I know I always turn to sports for both of those questions. So it just goes to show how much they do impact like your life and stuff.
Exactly. We are so lucky to be a part of the community and everything. And even this community, talking on the podcast, all of our listeners and everyone that are excited to hear about what we have to say, us and the boys podcast, Speak of the Devils. And it's really cool, like everyone, all of us have mentioned, Dickinson specific, obviously sports as a whole. I enjoy talking to friends from other schools that are on sports because, like Sid said, it's very relatable and stuff. But Dickinson is just such a cool, unique little pod of us that are all really close. Like you said, like most likely we know a lot of people on other sports teams. And I think that close-knit community is one of the coolest things about Dickinson. And really cool that we get to talk to everyone and everyone that's part of this podcast kind of gets to be a part of the community as well. So on that note, we just want to thank everyone for tuning in again. We're really excited to keep this going. We've got a lot of episodes now, which is really, really cool, and gained a little bit of a following. So we are really excited to continue on, and we look forward to talking to you guys next week. See ya.